And what about the hindrances, the serious hindrances like the infrastructure and the logistics? Thank you.
And students' reluctance. And students' resistance, actually.
It's apprehension.
And teachers are reluctant. And, well, in my case, because we need students in my institute went on strike against online.
Indeed, I know. Thank you very much for all these questions. And unfortunately, we cannot take additional questions. We have taken at least, I think, 15 questions normally. And we try to cover them. Personally, I have 6 questions, so I give the floor to my friend Hassan to answer this set of questions before moving to Kulthum and Muaz. Then I will be the last one. Thank you.
Again, so glad to receive your reactions and your comments, and hopefully, these comments are going to help shape the paper I'm working on. But in fact, I have 2 major questions. The first one concerns whether the Laturian reading is objective or not to the cyber-Islamic environment. And you see that again here. It is a reading, and in fact this contradicts the spirit that it is objective or not. So the question, the focus is of this meeting is hybridity, and I guess hybridity goes beyond, thinking from a specific perspective, whether it is objective or subjective. Well, the same thing for the second question. Whether these digital institutions or these cyber-Islamic environments, in the terminology of Band, so whether they are a threat or a benefit to traditional institutions. Again, you see that these cyber institutions, they are supported by the traditional ones. Right. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Hassan. Dr. Bulwati.
Okay, so
Yeah, I think you have one question. All right.
Actually, I have 2 questions. Okay, so you asked me about decolonizing the mind. Actually, decolonization is not only about capsizing the social and political arena, but it is also a decolonization of the mind, because due to the colonial baggage and the practices, the unilateral practices of the whites only, the South African subject is inculcated a set of beliefs whereby whites are touted as the better ways, while non-whites are relegated to a subhuman position. So it's exactly about that. It's about freeing the South African consciousness from the manacles and the shackles of the past. Okay, so decolonization is primarily about that. And how to materialize that during the interregnum is hard to materialize, because the country was brought to a standstill. Okay, it was there is an impasse, there is a stalemate. So decolonizing the mind is a tough process, because colonization and the whites-only regime are not only a political ideology, but a whole cultural heritage. It's a whole enterprise. So it's exactly about that. That's why I said at the end that freeing the mind of the South African subject is hard to materialize. Okay, so in spite of her attempts to overcome such essentials, and now I'm answering Dr. Abdel's question, overcoming the essentialist practices of the past is not a trouble-free process. Okay, it's a tough journey. So despite her anti-apartheid attitude, the text is still implicated in the dichotomies of the past. There are dualities: us versus them, perpetrator versus victim, center versus periphery. So it's all about that. Okay? So have I answered the questions clearly? So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bulwati. I personally received 5 questions. hopefully all of them are interconnected, interrelated, because basically they deal with the prospects of hybrid learning, applicability of hybrid learning, access to hybrid learning, infrastructure, etc. Perception, reception as well, resistance to hybrid learning. In addition to applicability of hybrid learning for kids, for young learners. These actually are very interesting topics and issues that are being investigated right now in pedagogy and andragogy as well. And researchers are working on them extensively, especially that they are original topics, timely ones as well. And it is expected for similar situations to what we have witnessed during COVID-19 pandemic, that unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that, I'm going to get to come again. Mr. Vergessen dealt with the issue of hybridity as, is it transitional stage to fully digital one, fully online learning, online assessment, etc. Made it clear in my presentation and the book chapter as well that I'm not saying that hybrid learning is going to be the norm or the only way of teaching, etc. That's not acceptable. Especially that we need to have interaction, direct interaction between learners and teachers, classroom environment as well. The teacher needs to see the impact of what they are saying, the acceptability and the accessibility of what they are saying, explaining in the eyes, in faces, and the reactions, the feedback obtained from learners, the way they interact, etc. This is highly important. So what I'm saying is that hybrid learning is an alternative one that we can make use of not only during pandemics, but also in similar situations. You know what's happening now in Ukraine, for example. The system wasn't prepared. I think hundreds or tens of universities are closed now. There was another question also from Najed concerning hybrid learning for kids. Are kids prepared and equipped to deal with the hybrid learning and hybrid assessment or not? I'll tell you something. When I was in KSA, my child studies in prep school and elementary school, and they were teaching them using WhatsApp. And the teacher, they managed to find different creative, original ways to convey the learning outcomes and assess the learning outcomes themselves using formative assessment. And the student was the pupils were required to record themselves, to answer using Google Forms, using different ways of learning and assessment. And personally, I found it interesting, and I enjoyed it myself. The kids enjoyed it also because they want always to keep using their mobile phones, etc. So if you find useful opportunity to encourage them to use mobile phones, use that motivation itself in teaching and learning, that would be extremely interesting indeed. But certainly we need research to make sure that this is accepted or not by the teachers, or accepted or not by the learners. Is it working or not? Some of these research papers are being drafted right now. Others will need time in order to measure the impact on the children, the impact of digitalization and hybridization of learning on learning outcomes. So we have to wait for the national competitions in order to assess the real impact of COVID-19, for example, on educational attainment among students. Prospects of hybrid learning, the question of Dr. Abdawi. Again, this is debatable. It's a big issue, in fact. So is hybrid learning going to be the norm or not? As I said, it is not. I'm not advocating that hybrid learning has to be the norm, but there needs to be some regulations, new laws, new legislations concerning higher education and education in general, allowing for the possibility of integration of hybrid learning, not only in special cases, but also in order to normalize, let's say, with technology, to break the ice as well, to deal with resistance to change and innovation, which exists sometimes in the attitude of teachers, learners, and parents as well. Because everything that is new sometimes generates a lot of debates, but bit by bit people get accustomed to it, they try it, and then they discover that there are advantages that they can make use of. yes, tech literacy, Dr. Hatem, so tech literacy and access, this is important. And it's certainly the job of education institutions and the ministry and governments as well to work on this issue, to choose it as a strategic plan, to consider it a strategic objective to equip institutions, higher education institutions, but also secondary schools, etc., with required infrastructure, but also, and this is related to what Hassan has said as well, with tools, infrastructure, but with training. Teachers need to be trained on hybrid learning, hybrid assessment, etc. It shouldn't be simple dealing with it. I think it took me a long time. All right, so it shouldn't be simple or taken for granted or considered kind of simplistic, but a lot of workshops and trainings need to be done in order for teachers to benefit from hybrid learning and to consider it another opportunity for learning. Thank you very much, and I hope I managed maybe to answer some of the questions. Yes, Mars?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mimoun. So I begin by the last question that Dr. Hatem raised is, I do share the same opinion as Dr. Mimoun said, so stressing the need to training. So what I did in class is I started with myself, experiencing. So the question is disruption of teaching, both teaching and learning, what to do. So the teacher himself is considered. So the first step is to try to find new ways. I searched for tools, and there are easy tools to use for both. It's not maybe the issue is perceived as an extra burden or loading for both teachers and learners. The other way around is that's going to make both teachers and learners' life easier. So the tools I experienced are, the criteria for using the tools are so easy to use for both the teacher and the learner. Secondly, I try to train my students in class, both in class and online. So, and then see their reflections, and we are going to decide together what tools to use for what tasks. How much time, even on the table of my presentations, maybe the question is the learner engagement is to stress. So maybe students are using their mobile phones, yes, and everybody is using mobile or tablet. So why not including, so this is in the learning and teaching process, and just show them how to do this. With QR code, just a simple trick, tech trick, you can get plenty of tasks to do. It's a kind of, maybe I'm quoting this, maybe it doesn't exist in the literature, but mobile hybrid learning, using the mobile. So I tried with my learners. So going back to the question of the question of blended or hybrid. So the focus is in the literature is maybe a mixture of flipping, or those are the terminology maybe interchangeably used, but with the blended learning the focus is on the tools, the technological tools. With the introducing of 100% online learning, there were so many challenges, as you know, especially taking the case of our Tunisian context. There are so technological challenges, internet access, etc. So what works is better to hybridity in terms of face-to-face learning, online learning, and in connection between them is the support. What I said at the first in my presentation is not in terms of just the tools or hybridity of humans, both learners and the tech, and the connection between the connection and the collaboration between both learners and teachers is essential for feedback and for continuous assessment and learning. Going back to another question asked by Jihad, it's Bloom's taxonomy. Aligning hybrid learning with Bloom's taxonomy is also for the part of the instructors and of course policymakers to do this. Well, in terms of designing of hybrid learning, what works best for, so the question is in the balance, what works best for face-to-face, like getting back for theoretical background from constructivism approach and social approach. For example, pair work and group work can be done in class, and also can work on, we can collaborate online. So the engagement is for as I presented in terms of learner engagement. For example, collaborating on Padlet, the learners are going to make self-evaluation and also peer evaluation, and also find material for self-study and reflecting again and again on their learning process. So I think I've answered all. For the question of Dr. Hassan is how learned achievers could be using those tools to maybe to not just the tech part, but the learning process itself. So we begin by maybe another term is differentiated, because what those tools allow is the differentiated aspect. Using a platform like Live Worksheets, you can use plenty of resources, digital tools and resources, and just to kind of personalize learning easily. And what's again cool about those tools is the feedback. So the teacher is not going to everything is going to be automatically the scoring, the grading, and also the commands and the feedback is there for the teacher to analyze, and both the teachers and learners to analyze and reflect for future use. Thank you. Maybe I've answered all of the questions. So the last question is designing hybrid learning is a great research question, and for applying it in our Tunisian context. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. I would like to express my sincere thanks to a number of colleagues, students, volunteers, Mr. staff as well, who have enormously helped in the organization of this symposium and being very supportive in its realization as well. In my initial speech, I used Standard Arabic. In my presentation, I used English. I would like to use Tunisian Arabic now. زرجة تونسية. I'm going to like this. نحب نشكر برشا الزملاء في قسم الإنجليزية اللي عاونوني برشا على التنظيم نتاع الندوة هذه، ونخص بالذكر منهم دكتورة نزار الهمامي، دكتور حاكم هداجي، دكتور كمال عبداوي، دكتور عقلي، دكتور أيمن المغاني، دكتور بشير حمداوي، دكتور مجد سياسي، دكتور محمد خليفة، رعينا هنا، أستاذ رعينا هنا، دكتور جاسم مشري، دكتورة أميرة عاشور. هذا اللجنة المنظمة اللي فعليا اشتغلت على تنظيم هذا الملتقى الدولي متعدد الاختصاصات المتعلق بإعادة النظر في التهجين revisiting hybridity in text and context. Many participants have participated in this symposium, 46 including our distinguished keynote speakers from many universities in Tunisia and abroad as well. I think I switched to English without realizing. الكلمة الختامية نحب نخليها لعميدنا وأستاذنا طبعا البروفيسور radhouan البريكي اللي يعتبر هو الطاقة المحركة the engine behind all of these initiatives. كل هذه المبادرات وغيرها، ولكن قبل ما نعطيه الكلمة وأكيد مش يعبر عن هذا الموضوع طبعا نحب نشكر برشا طلبة كلية الآداب والعلوم الإنسانية، المطوعين المنظمين للندوة، إن شاء الله ما ننسى حد، يوسف خليل سكن، فاطمة نسرين زينب سيرين كل المتطوعين يعني فردا نفرا الحقيقه كانوا ديما موجودين، كانوا ديما يعاونونا. شكر كبير برشا السي نائب مجدي الباجي كاتب القسم اللي طبعا موجود صباحا مساء بعد الصباح الصباحي. شكر كبير لمدام عايده، عاونتني برشا في وسع معايا وسع برشا في الابليكاسيون نتاع البوك نتاعنا. مدام سيهان زاد تعبناها ونخلي الكلمه للبروفيسور radhouan البريكي لختام هذا المؤتمر قبل الصوره الجماعيه. تفضل.
المدير المزعج وانا العميد اللي عنده طاقه كبيره. اسمعنا الكلمات في النهايه هو شعور الارتياح مش كما شعور النهايه. انت كي تفلسمون دو كور التعبيرات بعد 3 ايام 10 ابريتو لازم تبقى حوايج الحدث به لازم الفكره نتاعو احسن. de la rose ne reste que le nom de la rose. بالاسم اللي يبقى. الأنشطة بتاعنا جميلة والذكرى بتاعها باش تكون أكيد أجمل. دونك عشنا 3 أيام استمتعنا بالبريكيتي. دونك بريكيتي كانت مش على المستوى الجغرافي، تمثيل الأساتذة يعني من المؤسسات، أغلب المؤسسات موجودة يعني من نوبة سعدين المشرف وجيبه سكول سوسه صفاقس والموجودين في التمثيليه مع هيبريديتي جيوغرافيك امبيكابل. مع ذلك ثم الهيبريديتي تميز الجامعه التونسيه فيها الطرافه وفيها الوضوح وفيها الدقه وفيها المنهج القوي والعكسي. هذا الكل معناتها هذا من خاصيات الجامعه التونسيه والمسناه بالصور في الجيل الاول نتاع الاساتذه الجامعه التونسيه ولا الجيل الثاني اللي هو جيل الحماس وجيل المشعل معناتها الشمس. وهذا يخلينا كان معناتها مسؤولين على مستقبل الجامعه التونسيه. وان شاء الله الكل الاساتذه معناتها الكبار بتاعنا نتاع الجامعه التونسيه تعدي المشعل هذايا معناتها للاجيال القادمه باش في نطاق الاستمراريه. اهميه السيمبوزيوم هذايا، اهميه الكولوك هذايا بالطبيعه خارج الجلسات العلميه اللي كانت ممتعه، يعني ثم لقاءات اخرى على هامش الندوه. لكن المحادثات اللي وقعت في البوست كافي، المحادثات اللي وقعت في الفطور، المحادثات اللي وقعت في الاوتيل، هذوك ما عندي حاجه خارقه العاده. المحادثات اللي اساتذتنا الكبار معناتها عطاو الفرصه للباحثين الشبان سواء اللي يعملوا في ماستر ولا اللي يعملوا دكتوراه، هذيك حوايج هامه ماذا بها تلتقط. ماذا بينا زاد كي نسمعوا احنا الباحثين الشبان كي يسمعوا كوميونيكاسيون بارفوا تعطيه فكره باش يعمل حاجه بيرسونيلمون معناتها حبيت نبدا المجهود بالطبيعه باش نسمع اللغه الجميله معناتها فهمتني جايه من معناتها برونسياسيون اجمل. دونك اسونسيالمون في الجلسه الاولى كنفكروا مدام جوست نعطي اكزومبل قيمه البحث ولا التونسيون معناتها مدام سلامي عطات اكزومبل تاع الانيمال تونتاكولير تونتاكول، عطات صوره فيها صوره تاع البول هي موجوده. الذي يفكر في حاجه موجوده اسونسيالمون على كاتب نشتغل عليه. مثلا انا عندي درو اسمها بوليب معناتها كيفاش من موديل بيولوجيك تتعدى الموديل تكستويل. ربما نشوفوا البحث هذا ابريدو هي تكستواليتي، يعني ان تكست هيبريد. ايش معناتها ان تكست هيبريد؟ هو عصي على تحطه في خانه، لا هو رومان لا هو إسي لا هو تياتر لا حتى شيء. يعني ان اليمون ترانس جينيريك معناتها يتجاوز معناتها لكل الاجناس. بالطبيعه الموديل هذا ايش لوتور يستعمل فيه؟ يعني موديل بيولوجي شنو خاصيته هذا الانيمال هذا؟ دايور يتيان دو دو رين انسيكت وبلانت. اثنين هذه بريديتي بيولوجيك. بريديتي بيولوجيك امبيكابل essentiellement c'est bio plante végétale. Donc شنو تعمل له هذا؟ نحي له راسه دققه ما يموتش، تقسم على 20 طرف ما يموتش. ترجعوا في الجوندوات ما يموتش ديما اون ريسور ليكزومبل تاع فينيكس كي سي سون لكن هو il est capable de se reproduire بالرغم من ما تعمل له vous pouvez tout lui infliger يكابيتي تقسموا 20 طرف يحيى الإيماج هذه عادش تستعملها هذيك الحكايه ماذا بينا كل واحد منا يكون عنده الخاصيه هذيك يقتلوه يصبح حي هذيك باش نخرج انا الموديل هكاك وناخذ بالانالوجي ناخذ كوم اتيتود كوم كومبورتمون كوم بوستور انتلكتويال كوم بوزيسيونمون انتربريتو الامور هذه الكل موجوده نقولوا فيها ونمشي لكن انت لازم تتلبس بك وتلبسها مش مع اونتيز خايبه لكن تكون مقتنع بها تتصرف في موادين اخرى هذه هو الحاجه اللي دونك يخرج هو يعمل تكست بولي بو l'adjectif تاع تكست مونستريو لهنا مونستريو راهو المونستر عاده نحن نقولوا له هو السيكلور ولا شادر بيي واحد عنده ساق نتاع شادر اكسترا احنا لومان عندنا مشاكل كبيره معاه هذاك ما يشبهناش هذاك مونستر اور مش مونستر المونستر راهو فينا نحن واللونج راهو فينا احنا كل واحد كيفاش تخرج راهو كل واحد منا ينجم يخرج كيف دونك نحبوا معناتها اون جراف تاع نطلعوا اونج اون جراف في حاجه اخرى بارايور نجموا نطلعوا مونستر وحده وضربه معناتها واللي قد تجي دونك اسونسيلمون ولا لي سيتوياسيون هذه الحياه هذيك لا ميتافور فيف هذيك اسونسيلمون الاستعارات التي نحيا بها هذه هي الدنيا كيفاش احنا نعملوا ترانسفير ميتافور ابريتو علاش مبنيه الميتافور فيها ترانسفير تبدا من نيفو 1 تمشي نيفو 2 وبارفوا الميتافوريك راه جاي قبل مش كيف عاد دي مع السونس بروبر مش العكس السونس ميتافوريك جاي قبل السونس بروبر et c'est un autre débat à voir c'est une provocation احنا حتى البروفوكاسيون سونتيفيك بروفوكاسيون هذيك ما نردش عليها دايور مدام هاجر كي تبعت التوا شغف لو هي بويزي متبعه مع هذه البويزي والاستيك خاصة الطرح الاستيكي والمقاربة الجمالية الحاجة هذيك تخلينا نتصداو لأي رداءة ولأي هجانة بالمفهوم السلبي وأي خساسة وأي نغال لو نقول هكا راهو استيك تكلمت على بودلير يعمل استيك دو لا ليدور دونك حتى باش يعمل هجاء فن راهو هجاء سي با نابورت كي قد بحيث اللي يهجي مازال كيف سيبالي دونك كل شيء فن كل شيء نعملوه فن حتى كي باش تسبوا السبان الهجاء وكل شيء فيه فن دونك احنا دونك ننساو شنو نشدوا احنا كونتكست بوزيتيف لي كونوتاسيون ميليوراتيف اللي هما شنو بالنسبه لي انا ليبريديتي وماذا بينا زاد نسميوه لوم مزيان يعني عندي كان لوم المزيان يكون احنا في الثلاث ايام هذه الكلمه المنطوقه اكثر بعشرات المرات هي ايبريديتي بالانجليزيه ماذا بيك حبيت تنطق ايبريديتي بالفرنساويه هجين بالواحد هجين لكن تاع كوميونيكاسيون مش كان دونك كما ذكرت انا في الافتتاح هاجر قبل ما تجي ذكرت بالمفهوم المجازي كلمه هجين انا الرجل الهجين حاشاكم الرجل اللئيم واذا انت اكرمت الكلمه ملكتها هذا هو لكن احنا شو نشدوا الكلام البوزيتيف ونبنيو عليه الاخر نتقيو عليه بالضبط خاطر ما يلعبش دونك نخليه على جنب دونك شنو يبقى بالنسبه لنا في فرنسا؟ يبقى ليبريتي هي كروازمون هي تلاقح هي تزاوج هي تفاعل ويبقى اسونسيلمون حاجه اخرى ميز اون سينيرجي هذه ليبريتي نشدو ميز اون سينيرجي هذه ربما التيتر اللي عطاهولي ونشرف باش ناخذه نعرفوا وسام على صدري معناتها هذه القوه سامحوني القوه الناعمه ولا اللي سميتها انت الانرجيه هذه داخل دونك on a besoin d'espoir on a besoin de bonheur et aussi bien l'espoir que l'espoir c'est un choix احنا نختاروه واحنا نجيبوه دونك ما نعرفش على نمزي بارك الله فيك شنو علاقه هذا موجود
نعمل صورة جماعية نختم بها المؤتمر